Picture this: a young adult man, out of shape, living in his mother's basement, eating junk food, playing video games, and has a bottom-of-the-barrel job. For a long time, this has been comic relief in popular culture. What self-respecting 30-year-old would have such a life? He's obviously a loser who doesn't try in life, so we can laugh at this character to make ourselves feel better. 25 years ago, this situation was seen as comic relief, and I'm not just saying that. This clip from the year 2000 is from a show called Get a Life, and it features the main character, Chris Peterson.
Let me just say this as precisely as I possibly can.
Okay.
You're 30 years old. You still live with your parents. You're losing your hair. And you're stupid. Yeah, I think that just about covers it.
Now this scene doesn't exactly ring the same in the mid-2020s. It's fairly common today to have men in their late 20s and early 30s living at home. In fact, in the US, 55% of 18 to 30-year-old men still live at home. In Australia, that number's around 54%. Something that people joked about in movies or on TV 25 years ago is basically the norm today for men. Women are doing better in this department, with less of them living at home, but also they're doing better in education. In recent years, this issue has taken the limelight, and it's got a lot of people asking, why are young men falling behind?
It wasn't so long ago that men enjoyed a clear advantage in American society. But these days, a different story is emerging. Men and boys falling behind.
Boys are not simply falling behind relative to girls, but they're falling behind in absolute terms from prior generations of boys.
If a group is falling behind in society, we don't tell them to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. We spend billions of money in taxpayer-funded charities and think tanks to try and work out what's going on and to try and bring them along for the ride. That's not happening with men.
They don't have a stable job, a wife, a white picket fence, or little rugrats running around the house. They often try to follow their parents' way of life, but it just doesn't work. It seems, somewhere along the way, they messed up. They think to themselves, I choked, I got lazy. But is it really their fault? Or is it a failing system?
You are watching ColdFusion TV.
But it's now clear that there are many boys and men who have fallen behind, and that we have to be able to think about gender inequality in both directions. One thing that makes that hard is that the changes have been so quick, so rapid, that it's hard to update our beliefs to match the new facts. It's a bit like the needles on a compass swinging round. Suddenly north is south and south is north. It's really quite disorienting. But it's clear that on some measures at least now men are lagging quite a way behind, not least on college campuses. That reflects the fact that boys are trailing girls throughout the education system. 2/3 of the top academic performers in high school, measured by GPA, are girls. And 2/3 of those at the bottom are boys. And it's not just in the US. If we look at the 20 most economically advanced countries in the world, there's on average a 13 percentage point gap in the share of young men and young women with a college degree, with young women much more likely to have a college degree. And in some nations, the gap is much bigger.
Just last year, in a Wall Street Journal article titled, "America's Young Men Are Falling Even Further Behind," journalist Rachel Wolf decided to follow a family of 6, the Morenos, all in all a normal family. The thing was, while their only daughter recently graduated from business school and got engaged, her 3 brothers, well into adulthood, are still living with their parents in their childhood bedrooms. When the father was asked about the situation, he stated, quote, "Something is amiss here. We love them. We love having them around. But that's not how you build your life." End quote. When they asked one of the sons, Daniel, if he shared this concern, he said, quote, "I just felt so lost. Nothing is really stopping me. It's just myself standing in my own way." End quote. For Daniel, a lot of this had to do with COVID. A loss of connection with his friends led him to drop out of school and become aimless. A study in 2021 by the Survey Center on American Life found that only 26% of men reported having 6 or more close friends. In 1990, it was 55%. And in 2021, those who had 0 friends were 17%. In 1990, it was 3.4%. That's a 500% increase in men with zero friends since 1990. Research also shows that women tend to invest more in maintaining their friendships than men do, so female friendship rates tend to be higher. But while COVID may have made many men drift apart, including Daniel, something else is going on here. COVID didn't cause every man to start falling behind, and also not in the same way. In the US, the percentage of men living at home between the ages of 25 and 34 has virtually doubled since the 1980s. So what gives? Well, rising house prices are an obvious factor in the West, so there's less shame in living in a generational household, but it goes deeper. Regardless of affiliation, the broader consensus over the last 3 to 5 years appears to be that traditionally male-dominated industries like manufacturing are shrinking, while service industries are reaching all-time highs around the world. And those sectors are the ones that men aren't conventionally trained to excel in. Just the statistical reality puts young men at a disadvantage, and that's not all. Traditionally male-dominated fields are more commonly accepting of women. Ultimately, that's a good thing, but it does provide extra competition for men.
And women looking for a job or even a career are discovering there is a whole new world out there.
As it turns out, roles traditionally filled by men now being offered to women. Here's 3 on Your Side's Gary Harper.
This iron worker has made a successful career for herself.
I love physical work.
You may find Adrienne Donato 30 feet above the ground, welding and using a handheld jackhammer. She even worked for the same company through 2 pregnancies.
They were very supportive.
Iron workers are just one of many fields now trying to recruit women. The industry just announced the new paid maternity benefits.
They're going to make good money, but they're going to have great benefits to go along with it. So they'll have that health insurance and a pension plan.
In the world of dating, things are changing for young men too. When it comes to dating, for many Gen Z men, they can practically kiss that goodbye. In the US, for example, during the 1970s and 80s, the percentage of men who weren't married by age 40 were in the single digits. But by 2021, that had ballooned to 28%. As young men struggle to excel in life, they tend to appear less attractive to a lot of women. Word on the street is that young women just can't find a good man anymore, so many quit dating altogether. But the culture has also shifted. According to the Washington Post, the Me Too movement of the mid-2010s caused men to be reluctant to approach women in real life for fear of being perceived as a threat.
We're going to talk about the consistent phenomenon of men not approaching women when they're out, when they're at the coffee place, when they're at the workplace. It's, I guess, just a plague upon society that is impacting young women right now who want to be approached and who want a little bit of attention to be paid to them. In the age group of 18 to 25, for young men, around 50% of them say they have never approached a woman, not once, not ever. Now, when asked why they can't find this drive to do so, most of them are expressing that they don't want to be seen as a creep or be accused of sexual harassment in the wake of this whole Me Too movement thing that's happened.
That being said, I've heard and seen a lot of stories about how young men behave out there, and they're really not helping themselves.
I have only gone from like the boy meets girl to like hell level destruction. This guy at the gas station comes up to me. He is smoking a cigarette, blows the smoke in my face and says, "I really want to hang out with you tonight." I said, oh.
So like most things, there's 2 sides to this. Reduced only to dating apps, men tried their luck for companionship there. Unfortunately, it's been a rough game. Each woman would receive thousands of matches, while it's not unusual for a man to be swiping for days and not receive anything. As for the last layer in a sandwich of bad misfortune, there's also a forming political polarization between the genders. Gen Z men are swinging conservative, while Gen Z women are more liberal. The end result is a silent gender conflict among young people, and more young men end up being single than ever before. Even the men that are doing better, the ones that are out of the house, possibly married, and building families, there's still remarkably similar issues. As Richard Reeves puts it, quote, "The sense a lot of young men have is not being sure that they're needed, or that they're going to be needed by their families, by their communities, by society," end quote. Both groups are now struggling more than ever to find a driving force to find meaning. They are losing a sense of purpose. Around 2016, the dialogue around young men and a loss of sense of purpose started to gain traction. In the Western world, it was most famously expressed by the confusion in why figures like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan were suddenly popular among young men. A decade ago, these online personalities filled a hole which was routinely overlooked as a target audience: male role models for young men. Like it or not, the online spheres they created provided direction to young men who found themselves aimless in a rapidly changing world. The conversation took on a more academic flavour in 2022 when Richard Reeves published his findings in his book Of Boys and Men. It highlighted a disparity that he had to research to believe. At the same time, another author, Scott Galloway, started touring the country with a similar message. His emphasis, though, was on later education, employment, and dating as an adult. When on a podcast by Chris Williamson, the open statistics he shared were pretty revealing.
I have friends who have 2 daughters and a son, and I'm saying this metaphorically, but loosely speaking, the daughters at Penn, the younger daughters working at a PR firm in Chicago, and the son is in their basement vaping and playing video games. Young men, 7 to 10 high school valedictorians are girls. For every 1 male college graduate over the next 5 years, there's going to be 2 female college graduates. 93% of mass shooters are men, 3 times more likely to overdose, 4 times more likely to commit suicide, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. They do worse in single-parent households. For some reason, girls have the same outcomes in a dual-parent household versus a single. We have more single-parent households. Our education system is biased against men on a behavior-adjusted or boys on a behavior-adjusted basis are twice as likely to get suspended for the same infraction as a girl. 2/3 to 80% of all primary and secondary teachers are women, and understandably, they're going to champion little girls who they see themselves in.
Galloway also explains that the lack of attention to impulse control in young men borders on criminal neglect. Not only that, but according to both Reeves and Galloway, this lack of focus has all but guaranteed that in an equal sex opportunity system, placing an 18-year-old male next to an 18-year-old female for a job or college application puts men at an immediate disadvantage.
Yeah, the delta I've heard, that's striking. The delta I've heard is 2 years. But even if you think about 2 years, you basically, if you have 2 18-year-old people applying to college, basically the 18-year-old is competing against the 16-year-old. So imagine you're in 10th grade applying to college and all the girls are in 12th grade. That's what we're facing right now.
The disparity has doubled the number of stay-at-home fathers, which may not sound like a totally bad thing on paper, but there's a lot of men that aren't happy with their situation, and in search of answers, it opens the door to troubling influences by online gurus. It wasn't unusual to see younger males, married or not, being told to reclaim masculinity through affairs, mistreatment of partners and spouses, and even walking away from traditional responsibilities.
Other people when things aren't going well for them. And so, what do the most violent, dangerous societies all have in common? They all have a disproportionate number of the most dangerous person on the planet, a young, broken, alone man. And we're just producing way too many of them. And we can't even have an honest conversation about it, because the moment you start evangelizing for young men, the moment you're seen as quote unquote pro young man, the natural assumption is that means you're anti-women, because admittedly, there's some guys out there on TikTok claiming to be trying to give men confidence. It's basically thinly veiled misogyny.
Yes.
Referring to women as bitches, and you got to own the bitches, and you got to get out there, take my class for $49 a month, and you'll get the money and put the bitches in their place. And you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's what young men are susceptible to.
And we should pay attention, because the longer this happens, the more it becomes a lose-lose game for everyone. On the extreme end of the spectrum, there's a belief that men will become obsolete, but most sane people understand that men and women need each other. We understand the traits that both possess, and both are more than necessary for a functional society. The truth is that the system is failing, and it's been failing for an incredibly long time. And nowhere is this more noticeable than the modern education system. Over the past 15 years, the crisis among young men in the classroom has been discussed in small circles, but the conversation is growing rapidly. Male performance in school has been a real issue. But the thing is, this change might be a lot older than you realize. It didn't start with Instagram or TikTok. The split between young men and women in academia started in the 1970s in the US. It was after a landmark piece of legislation called Title IX. It prohibits gender discrimination in educational programs and activities receiving federal funding. Similar laws were also passed in the UK and Canada during the 1970s. And of course, this was definitely a step in the right direction for educational equality, but it had an unintended consequence. The paradigm shifted into a belief that young men had already made it. From here on out, the majority of resources should be diverted towards improving schooling for the opposite gender. Richard Reeves, who had been studying the gaps in development for years, says that this isn't really a battle of the sexes, at least not entirely. It's a complex crisis of neglect, where, for a long time, young boys were seen as doing just fine. The focus was on uplifting young females in education, and that's fine, that's great even. But while that goal was being worked towards, young men silently started to slip. According to the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, enrollment rates signal a sign of success. On the plus side, the gaps between young men and women are starting to narrow. But conversely, and what they fail to mention, is that male enrollment is visibly starting to stagnate or even become worse, especially for primary education. The gap for university enrollment is almost at 10% for half of European countries. It doesn't matter if it's Bosnia and Herzegovina, Sweden, or elsewhere. Virtually everywhere in the West sees more females enrolled in university than men. I personally think it's great that more women are being educated. Most reasonable people will agree that opening the gates of success for everyone is a good thing. But the focus here in this episode is that the trajectory of males isn't looking good. There's a concerning and significant gap in performance as far back as elementary school, and women consistently outpace men in college attendance. A New York Times survey found both male and female teenagers, when talking about those closest to them, say this: 2/3 of both genders agree that the young men that they study with are more disruptive, lack leadership skills, and have difficulty relating to teachers in the classroom. Unfortunately, even when young boys are growing up at home before school, they're not being educated to the same extent either, especially when it comes to literacy. It's not a hard and fast rule, but a recent study from HarperCollins found that, quote, only 29% of boys aged 0 to 2 are read to daily or nearly daily, compared to 44% of girls of the same age. Other studies show that fathers are less likely to read to their sons than their daughters, and that both parents are less likely to encourage boys to read at all. As a result, boys tend to read less, choose simpler books, and struggle to finish them, all of which affects their reading comprehension and their academic readiness, but surprisingly, also their empathy and pro-social behaviour. And this is something that a lot of parents don't even realise they're facilitating. The academic readiness gap is something that we discovered first because it's measurable. We can see it in test scores, graduation rates, and class participation. However, the social component is often overlooked. The boys can just play with their toys all day, and that's fine. Less value being placed on young male development is already showing unfavourable results for millennials. And now that the oldest members of Gen Z are approaching 30 years of age, we're already beginning to witness an emergence of a male class that is uniquely isolated and unable to properly interact with the outside world. So what can we say about future generations in the next 10 to 20 years? If we're not careful, we could see more generations of full-grown men, aimless, living alone, or debating with themselves about the future, like the Morneau brothers at the start of this episode. So the question is, how do we fix this? Well, here's a quick-fire round of solutions to get us out of this mess. Number 1. Early intervention. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research states to prioritize reading in years 1 to 4, where boys fall behind first. Number 2. Consistent routines, family outreach, and in-school tutoring helped attendance according to the Education Policy Institute. Number 3. Mentoring and social-emotional coaching for teenage boys is another angle. For example, Chicago's Becoming a Man program cut violent crime arrests by 45 to 50% and lifted on-time graduation by 12 to 19%. Number 4. A stronger path from school to apprenticeships. High-quality apprenticeships raise employment and earnings. And now, especially with the state of universities and AI threats, this could be a bright spot. Programs like Year Up and Per Scholars produce large, sustained earning gains for young adults, exactly where many young men stall. Number 5. Male-friendly mental health. In Australia, men's sheds, Reduce isolation and support well-being. Headspace for 12 to 25-year-olds is another option. And finally, number 6. Paternity leave and engaged fatherhood. According to Childcare Canada, when leave is also reserved for dads, a father's involvement in child rearing rises meaningfully. The downstream benefits of the child's development and schooling follow. That helps the next cohort of boys. So what do we make of all of this? The truth is, all of the experts highlighted have a lot of theories about how we got here. Some think it's the sole product of feminism, while others blame online influences. But the experts do also provide some solutions. According to Reeves, there are simple and easy steps that would make an immediate impact on male underperformance.
We need to recruit hundreds of thousands more male teachers, especially in subjects like English, where the boys are struggling so much, and which is the subject men are least likely to be teaching. And here I think we can draw some really good lessons from the successful movement to get more women and girls interested in STEM subjects. So that means setting clear targets, launching public campaigns, and offering financial scholarships to men who want to enter teaching as a profession.
Care specialist Erica Commissar wants to take things further. She points to studies showing that single-gender schools produce better adjusted young men and women.
It seems clear to me that it is the system which is disabling, rather than the boys who are disabled. Now, there's a lot we can do to make the education system work better for boys. Let's start with those two big problems of later brain development and lack of male teachers. So first, we should start boys in school a year later. And the idea there is to level the playing field, given those differences in the timing of brain development. And actually, that's already quite common practice at private schools and in lots of affluent communities. But it's actually not the boys from rich families who will benefit the most from that extra year. It's the boys from lower income, poorer neighborhoods and families who would most benefit from the gift.
Obviously, many of these ideas go beyond the current beliefs of how men and women should be raised. But according to the data, this is exactly why things need to change, and they need to change fast. Today we have a crisis in young male demographics. It doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. The fact of the matter is, young men are falling behind. And this has to do with priorities. During our noble effort to make things more equal, we forgot that this requires everyone to receive an equal amount of attention, compassion, and commitment to keep things stable. The mistakes of the past 30 years are prevalent now, but it's not too late to change things for the next generation. Also, if you've watched this whole video and are experiencing anything I've talked about, leave your comment, as it will be cool to get a community discussion going. As we've seen today, a lot of young men out there are struggling. But one way to get back on your feet if you're struggling professionally is by learning subjects that will give you a leg up. That's where today's sponsor, Brilliant.org, comes in. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, data analytics, programming, and AI. For example, they have a course on how AI works. It covers everything from large language models to neural networks, tokenization, and loss functions. Each lesson on Brilliant allows you to play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. I find Brilliant useful for refreshing myself on key subjects. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. Learn at your own pace to brush up on a subject for work, or just for your own self-development to prepare yourself for further studies. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/coldfusion or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Hey guys, thanks for watching the whole way through this video. I really appreciate it and also appreciate all your support over all the years. It's been amazing. If you do want to watch something else societal related, I've done a video on the loneliness epidemic, and it goes to show that it doesn't matter if you're male or female. There's a lot of people going through loneliness at the moment, so it's a pretty important topic. But I think that's about it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers.